ask, have you ever done something in your life that you know pretty darn soon you're going to regret it? Yeah, guilty faces everywhere. Like, for example, I'm about to tell you a story about a girl I hit on, and my wife is sitting in the back row. So I know all about regret and how comfortable my couch will be tonight, but I'm kidding. No, so when I was, I don't know, about 11 or 12 years old, a new girl came to my school. He had transferred there from Wisconsin, and every guy, just like, we immediately fell in love with her. Yeah, you guys, you remember back in the day, even you girls, there was just, oh, I mean, we were just smitten. And I'm no exception, biggest crush on her. But everybody was trying to get that date with her. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to have to do something different. I got to be a little bold on this one, right, guys? So I decided I'm not just going to ask her out or get her something. I'm going to write her a letter and send it in the mail. All right, I'm thinking, man, I'm going to be smooth doing this. So I pour my heart into this letter. And I'm like, it's sweat over every word, told her how much I liked her and how much I really would love to take her out. I mean, everything that I could do. And I finally got up the nerve to put it in the mailbox. And I tell you, for like the next week, I was just so excited. You know, I was planning out our first date. We're going to go see the movies, and then we're going to hang out at the mall. Because if you remember, that's what we used to do back in the day. Social media just ruined that. But that's just, that I was just so excited all week until, and you knew there was an until, I got my letter back in the mail with return to sender scrolled across the top. And inside was her reply saying, never in a million years, give up. That stung. I mean, I remember it now. It's like 30 years ago. So, I mean, and you know, I learned a couple of very valuable lessons that day. First off, never do the letter thing again. It was a bad idea. Don't try it, guys. But also, I learned, man, rejection hurts, doesn't it? I mean, it really does. And I think we've all had that. You know, it doesn't have to be a relationship just didn't start. But I mean, you could not get that job promotion or your bank card gets declined. I mean, every time it happens, it stings a little bit, doesn't it? And you know, I think the thing is, especially once we experienced enough rejection in life, we realize, you know, those are some of the best lessons that we ever learn. You know, I mean, we go through something. It hurt a little bit, but that hurt made us remember it a little bit more, right? But, you know, if you think about it, there are oftentimes stuff in our life that happens, these rejections, these disappointments, that we are just racking our brains trying to find out what just happened. You know, what am I supposed to be learning from this? And we can't quite wrap our heads around what on earth just happened to us. Like when a parent rejects a child, or when you've been working at your job for 20 years and 6 months before retirement they can you. Or you thought your marriage was going great and everything was wonderful, and then your spouse says, I'm leaving you. I mean, those kind of rejections, that's not like a missed opportunity. Those are the kind of rejections that they stay with us, right? And when we're done being angry at the person who rejected us, or let's be honest, we're taking a break from being angry from the person that rejected us, what do we always do? We turn back at ourselves and we start wondering those horrible questions. You know, what did I do wrong? What about me wasn't good enough? Well, why did this happen? And those kind of rejections, that's personal, isn't it? And I think sometimes what's worse is that we don't just have one rejection, but we are just in this entire season of our life that's just nothing but just disappointment and rejection and disappointment and rejection. You know, like we're doing everything right. We can't even tell what's going on. But no matter what we try, it just falls flat. You know, perfect example. Years ago when I graduated from seminary, you know, the Lutheran Church was going through a whole lot. I didn't really know where I was going to go, what I was going to do. I still had a little time before I can get ordained. And so I needed a real job. And out in y'all's world, the real world. No, I needed a job, and it was the height of the Great Recession. And I wasn't worried too much because I had a career before I was a pastor, believe it or not. And, you know, I've got a graduate degree from a top school. This shouldn't be hard. At least I'll be somewhere on the top of the list. So when that first rejection letter came in, and the second, you kind of blow it off, their loss. By rejection, 4, 5, and 6, you're like, okay, it's time for me. I'm going to have to go through and tweak my resume, go to a couple of networking meetings. By the time the 20th rejection letter came, it was brutal. By the time that 20th rejection letter came, let me tell you, that's when stress and anxiety started to come into my life. That's when it started to feel personal. That's when it really started to hurt, right? Guys, in less than a year, I applied and was turned down for over 300 jobs. Ask my wife. It's true. It was miserable. And when we go through those hard seasons of our life and we just can't understand what's happening, because how am I supposed to know the real world doesn't want to hire a pastor? That stress and that anxiety is not just part of our daily routine, but it clouds everything with us. It hurts us. We hold that, and we're just in such a pit in our life. It's not a slump. It's just flat out depression, and it hurts, right? And I think as people of faith, this is really hard for us, probably more so than the rest of the world, because, we believe that God is with us. We believe that God is going to carry us through this season and this time. But when you're that deep and dark, you cannot see where God's at work in your life. It's like I've heard before and I've said many times, when we're at our worst, Satan's at his best. And we're just in this dark, dark place. And then we start asking God, where are you? God, why is this happening? God, what have I done against you? God, where are you? Please help. And it's just this desperation in our faith and in our life. That kind of rejection, that kind of season in our life, guys, that's not just personal or missed opportunities. That's a spiritual thing. It's something about us that's broken. And we're mentally bankrupt and we're spiritually bankrupt and our emotions are shot. And even physically, we feel it. It hurts. That's a low point. And I think when these lepers encountered Jesus today, that's what was going on. I think we all know that leprosy is just a horrible, horrible disease. If you're not familiar, leprosy is a skin disorder, skin disease that first makes you break out in these terrible rashes all over your body. They're painful, they can bleed, and they leave you disfigured, terribly disfigured. And as the disease progresses, and I know it's almost lunchtime, but as the disease progresses, it begins to attack your nervous system, and your hands become crippled, and your feet become crippled. You can't use them, and since the nerves are dead, they just feel like dead weight. And then infection comes in, and necrosis sets in your hands and your feet and your limbs. And not to get too graphic, but parts of you begin to die off and fall off. Imagine living your life like that. That's where these guys were when they encountered Jesus. And normally when that would have happened in the ancient world, what they would have done, they would have said, okay, we're going to love you, but at a distance, right? We're going to quarantine these people. You've heard of leper colonies before. That's exactly what it is. They would put people together in a colony where they could be cared for. They could care for one another. They would provide them with whatever they needed, but you're over there. We love you, but we don't want that. But in ancient Israel, it was different. Remember, in ancient Israel, religion ran everything. And according to Levitical law, religious law, this is Leviticus 13 if you ever want to read it. But according to the law, if you are suspected of having leprosy, you were told that you must first go not to a doctor, but to a priest. And if that priest says you have leprosy, you were immediately banished from the city. You were told you must live alone. You had to tear all of your clothing and live in rags. You were not allowed to brush your hair or keep yourself. It was a sign of mourning. You had to have a face mask on at all times, and they didn't know about germs back in the day. This was to hide the shame of what you were, because nobody would want to see that. And then to top it all off, everywhere you went, you had to cry out, unclean, unclean, so that nobody could ever come near you and give you comfort. Can you imagine what those 10 men's lives must have been like. And guys, this isn't a disease that can take your life in 6 months. Folks, you can live with this disease for 20 years. And these men are waking up every single morning, rejected by their communities, rejected by their families, forced to be homeless, living alone out there, frightened and confused and broken. And on top of just having this terrible and debilitating disease that's slowly killing them, they got to cry out, unclean, unclean, so that nobody could give them comfort. And unclean, it was not a statement about your physical health. Because everyone could tell you're sick. I mean, you're standing outside the city wearing rags with a face mask on and you're missing 3 fingers. People knew you were sick. Unclean, when you're declared unclean by a priest, it was actually something of your spiritual state. The priest was saying you are unworthy before God. You're unclean. You cannot come before God. Essentially that there was a guilt on you and a sin on you. And they were basically telling these men, your leprosy is on you because you are guilty, because you are far from God, because you have offended God. It is this terrible thing because these men, think about what this must have done to their souls every day, having that on them, wondering, God, what did I do? God, how is it that I'm in this dark spot? And that depression they must have felt. The darkness that they must have lived in every single day. I think we've all had dark spots in our life and we can understand these feelings. But oh my gosh, 20 years. And this is what was on their mind when they meet Jesus. It's really a beautiful story. Read again what they said to Christ. They didn't say, Jesus, Master, heal us. They said, Jesus, Master, have mercy on us. They were asking God to forgive them. They were asking that they could somehow be restored to themselves. They wanted all of that hurt and that pain taken out of them. Not just that illness. They wanted mercy from God from this and that season of life. And I think Jesus picked up on that. And it's very significant he didn't just heal them right then. I mean, Jesus normally would just see a leper and he said, okay, you're healed, go about your way, God bless you, right? It's Tuesday for Jesus. That's not what Jesus does here. See, Jesus, he realized that just healing their body wouldn't really have healed these people. Because even if their bodies are healed, they're still going to carry that weight and that wonder and looking for answers of why did this happen? Why did I go through this? Why did my life turn out this way? God, what did I do even though my body's whole? It's just like you and I when we go through bad seasons of our life or where somebody hurts us terribly and we're rejected, we still look for answers. And even though we move on in our life, that just means we're still living. It doesn't mean that we're healed, right? And that's what Jesus got when he saw them. That's what they were asking for. And Jesus does this amazing thing. And you guys haven't heard me say it before. Jesus had an attitude about him, and I loved it. He really did. Jesus doesn't heal them immediately. What does he do? He says, go see the priests. And there's a couple of reasons for that. First off, it was only a priest who could say, wow, you don't have this disease, and only a priest who could restore you back into society, could allow you to be back there. But second, and more importantly, it was those same priests who just told these men that they are cursed by God, that they are not worthy for love, that they cannot be in a relationship with anybody. It's the same priest who cut them down and put them in the situation that they were in when they needed love the most. And Jesus was sending them there to throw it right back in their faces, saying, you do not understand the love of God. He healed them along the way so that those priests would have to acknowledge that these men were never cursed. But God just blessed them and healed them of an incurable and fatal disease. He was throwing it right back, saying, no, God loved them. And for the lepers, it was important too. It was important because they had to hear that and they had to see that and they had to know, I really am healed and restored. It was just taking that weight right off of them. See, what sometimes we miss, and Jesus got that day. is that real healing, it has to come from the inside out. Because we live in a world that every day somebody is going to tell us who we are. So every day we're going to face challenges and rejections. And you know what happens is all that stuff from the outside world, it just beats us down and it tears at our soul and it gets us in this dark place. Even the people around us who reject us, they're telling us in a way what our value is. And Jesus says, no. You can't let what's going on the outside define you on the inside, because that is going to lead to brokenness. That's going to lead to hurt. That's going to lead to depression. Jesus says, no, it needs to be the other way around. You need to understand where God is in those dark moments. You need to understand that God loved you through all of this. You had to have some peace with you in those dark moments to know that God is there. It's kind of like being in a dark room and somebody lighting a match. In that moment, your perspective on everything changes. You can start making your way slowly out of a dark place with just a little bit of light. But without it, in a dark room, in a dark place, you could never find your way out. That's the difference that Jesus knew. But it had to start on the inside to get you to the outside. I think it's so amazing that it was only the Samaritan who came back. It was only the Samaritan who got it. Because, those other men, they came back and kept on going once they saw they were healed to those priests, not because of the right thing, because they still wanted their approval and their acceptance. They weren't free of anything but the disease. Their hearts were still tied to this world. But it was that Samaritan who came back and said, no, I am healed. And I don't care what this world says about me. I don't care what they can do to me. I am healed. God loves me. My life has value and matters, and nothing can ever get me down again. I think that the psalmist says it beautifully when he says, even though we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for the Lord is with me. And it wasn't until those lepers got it that they could have been healed. That's what they needed. When I went through that dark season of my life, one of many, 300 jobs I didn't get. What I didn't see is what God was doing. What I didn't see is that I couldn't have taken any of those positions to be what God had in store for me. If I'd taken any of them, I wouldn't have met my wife. If I took any of them, I wouldn't have met the people who got me to be ordained. If I took any of them, I wouldn't have had the experiences all over the country to see what God can do. I probably wouldn't even be a pastor today. But God had a plan, and all I saw was dark. That's the difference of light and darkness. And if you are in a dark place today, guys, it's a season. It's not forever. But God is with you. Hear that, if anything. You're not broken. You're not rejected. It's just what the outside world tells you you are. And when we're at our worst, Satan's at his best. And that's the message of this story. Let's pray. Gracious God, we know there's times when we don't see you. We know that there's times when we are so broken, we can't even understand what's going on in our lives. And that hurt, that stays with us, God. God, please, when we are that down, when this world starts to define everything in us, and that stress and that hurt and that depression blocks you out, God, break through. Be that light in our darkness. Remind us that you are right here with us in every valley. And that we've got to go through a few valleys before we can climb up to those peaks. But God, we need you then. And Father, if there's anyone in this room who's in one of those dark places, remind them today, right now, that you're here and you're with us and you love us and that there is a way out. It might take a while and the journey might be long, but it's with every step that we find our way out of the darkness.